Good evening. Welcome to Left, Right and Centre. I'm Vishnu Shom. It's a one-hour program today. First up, Sheezan Khan, the main accused in the TV actor Tunisha Sharma's alleged suicide, was reportedly so disturbed by the atmosphere in the country that emerged after the gruesome murder of Shraddha Walkar that he decided to end their relationship. This is what he told police. It's an account that Tunisha's family does not accept. They say he drove her to suicide and that they want action against him. All this at a time when, right on cue, there are statements by political leaders on love jihad once again. Was this a relationship gone sour, or was this abetment to suicide? That's our first debate. Later on the program, at 1:30, the CBI has arrested the Videocon Group founder Venugopal Dhoot in connection with the ICICI Bank loan fraud case. The arrest comes 2 days after the arrest of the bank's former CEO, Chandra Kochar. The CBI is investigating a case linked to alleged irregularities in an over 3,000 crore loan provided by ICICI to the Videocon Group when Chandra Kochar was heading the giant private sector bank. The big question is this: bank frauds in India, why do these happen so frequently? Where does this leave the system? But first, let's quickly go on to our top debate. After Shraddha Walkar, there is news of another unfortunate death, this one involving a case of reported suicide of a young woman, Tunisha. She's an actress. And there are now all sorts of things being said about what went wrong. Was this a case of love jihad, as some ministers in Maharashtra allege? Or was this a straightforward case of abetment to suicide as a result of a relationship that has gone dramatically wrong, drastically wrong? All sorts of questions being asked. I'm joined now by the advocate and social activist Abha Singh, Dr. Anjali Chhabria also with us, Suresh Shamlal Gupta, who's president of the All India Cine Workers Association, and Aniket Nigam are all with us on this program. Abha Singh, let me come to you first. What's now said, in fact, by the mother of Tunisha is that this relationship was all wrong and that she feels that he had driven her to suicide. Is this an argument that you believe is plausible?
See, I would go by the law per se, 306 IPC, which is abetment. You have to prove in the trial court that how did he abet? What does it say? What close relationship it has to the suicide? Whether he was blackmailing her, he pushed her to that extent that she had committed suicide. But when you see the pictures, they had lunch together. She's put her photograph on the Insta. And when he says they had broken off the relationship 15 days back. So when the mother comes and says, oh, he was in a relationship, he broke a relationship, I asked the mother, your daughter was just 20. Did you not know that she was under mental stress? Was she under depression? In fact, there are 1,64,000 suicides every year. So you mean to say that because of a media coming after somebody or a politician saying it's love jihad, is the police going to write a abetment to suicide? There would be lakhs of people behind bars only on this.
No, but they have charged him with abetment to suicide, which is why he's behind bars presently for a period of 4 days. So that is something that they're looking at. It can't be ruled out.
No, you have to prove abetment to suicide. How it is? Hundreds of people have relationships. If those relationships break off, you are going to say it's abetment to suicide. So do you believe
the police were incorrect in actually charging him with abetment to suicide? I know it has to be proven in a court of law, but he's been arrested and taken into custody on that basis.
See, I think they have really rushed into it because of the pressures. Because if you see the conviction rates in these type of cases, it's not even 10%. When they come to court, they are thrown out. How do you prove this abetment? What evidence they have without collecting evidence? And in fact, when a politician comes and says it's love jihad, you are trying to influence the investigating officer. You are trying to mentally pressurize him. When CRPC very clearly says that there should be no extraneous factors which should influence an investigating officer. If you remember, Wadia and Preeti Zinta's case, she says I was molested, and that too in Wankhede Stadium. At that time also I said it is affray, it is not molestation. But Mumbai police, again under pressures, wrote that
all right.
FIR.
Okay, Bab, let me go across to Aniket Nikam. Aniket, the other side of this entire argument which has been raised is that there's been the Shraddha Walkar case, and that the atmosphere in the country, apparently according to Sheezan, is so vile that he decided that he needed to get out of this relationship. According to police sources, he was so disturbed by the atmosphere in the country that emerged after the gruesome murder of Shraddha Walkar that he decided to opt out. Does this sound plausible?
Well, Vishnu, as a lawyer, let me tell you first that law of abetment to suicide is well settled. Because in a case like this, there has to be evidence, direct or indirect, circumstantial or otherwise, in order to show that this accused who has been charged with this offense drove the victim to such a mental state that she had no other option but put an end to her life. Now, unless such circumstances were either foreseen or created by that accused, one cannot be prosecuted for the offense of abetment to suicide. There must be direct or indirect acts of incitement. Now, somebody who doesn't want to continue a relationship, and for whatever reasons, I would not get into the details, but for whatever reasons he or she decides to break that relationship, and that the other partner takes the extreme step, then the question is, would it amount to abetment? Would that person who has committed suicide or who has put an end to his or her life was left with no other option? I completely empathize with the family of the departed soul, but at the same time, we must also look at the circumstances of the case. Merely because, of course, I say with a sense of responsibility that there is a death, but that does not mean that somebody has abetted that death unless there is certain circumstances to point towards
Aniket, I take your point, but let me just bring you what the uncle has said, and I don't at all mean to suggest that this is what I feel is how it's gone, but this is what he said, and I quote, "If so, then why were they having lunch together every day? By themselves in a room, what was that about? If there was a breakup, why were you spending time with her?" And this is interesting because apparently on the same day that she ended her life, they were together. So when you say circumstantial evidence, therefore, the argument being raised by the opposite side is that what happened in the few hours after this, that she ended her life?
Therefore, Vishnu, the police will have to closely scrutinize these last hours. What happened during these last hours? What did he do? Did he create a situation where she was driven to this mental point that she had to commit suicide and she was left with no other option? Now, all these circumstances, all these aspects will have to be looked into by the investigating agency. Now, after having broken up, they were still having lunches and dinners. Maybe they were friendly to each other. Maybe they decided. We do not know. But then was it being done on purpose? Was she being driven to this mental state? Was she being mentally harassed? Now, all this will have to be looked into, will have to be investigated. They will have to collect evidence in the course of investigation where witnesses would probably come and say, yes, he was mentally torturing or they were doing this casually. All this will have to be looked into, and without there being sufficient evidence, I still believe that one cannot be charged with abetment.
No, I take that point. Suresh
Right.
Shamlal Gupta,
Exactly.
President of the All India Cine Workers Association. Why do you believe that these last few hours needs to be looked at very, very closely? Why do you, and I've gone through that letter of yours, suggest that there is, more to this particular case than meets the eye?
मैं पहली बात मैं आपको कंफर्म करना चाहूंगा, पूरे भारतीय इंडस्ट्री में पहली बार है सेट पे किसी 20 साल की महज अभिनेत्री ने सुसाइड की, आत्महत्या, ऐसा लोग कह रहे हैं। और उस सेट पे और उस दौरान 4-5 सीरियल की शूटिंग और चल रही थी, वहां 600 से 700 लोग थे। आपने सुसाइड सुना होगा, कभी होटल के रूम में
600 से 700 लोग वहां थे और फिर भी आत्महत्या हुआ है, आप ये कह रहे हैं? जी
हाँ, और आपने हमेशा सुना होगा कि घर में सुसाइड पे हो रहा है और फिर होटल के रूम में हो रहा है, लेकिन पब्लिक प्लेस पे नहीं। शूटिंग के दौरान तुनिशा शर्मा कह के जाती कि मैं अपने रूममेट में जा रही हूँ आराम करने के लिए मेकअप रूम में। आप जाती हो और 2 घंटे तक पता नहीं चलता है कि वो क्या करेंगे अंदर। तो 2 घंटे के बाद तो दरवाजा तोड़ा जाता है और वो जो पुलिस पुशअप करते हैं उसके पर वो फंदा लगा के लटकी होती है, फिर उसे उतार कर उसे ले जाकर हॉस्पिटल में। उसके बाद पुलिस को मालूम पड़ता है। और तुनिशा वर्मा ये सुसाइड है या सुसाइड के लिए उकसाया हो, या बॉलीवुड में हमारे आप देखोगे 2-3 सालों में बैक टू बैक सुसाइड हो रहे। एक वर्ड आता है डिप्रेशन, वर्ड आता है, बॉलीवुड के लोग डिप्रेशन में जाकर सुसाइड करते हैं। ये
बैक टू बैक केसेस अगर भी हो, ये मतलब आप एक केस को दूसरे केस के साथ जोड़ नहीं सकते, हर केस अलग होता है।
आपको
नहीं, एक सेकंड सुरेश जी, आपने एक चीज जरूर कहा है। आपने कहा है कि वहां 600 से 700 लोग थे वहां, और उसी जगह में इस टाइप का सुसाइड करना असंभव है,
Suicide होना
अनलेस
असंभव है।
यू आर
और
अलेजिंग मर्डर। आप ये कह रहे
हाँ, और
हैं कि उनको हत्या किया गया था।
मैं पर्सनली का सेट पे गया हूँ, मैं वहाँ के लोगों से मिला, उसके सामने सीरियल आता है, उसके कलाकारों को मिला, वहाँ के वर्कर्स को मिला, मैंने जानकारी ली। तुनिशा वर्मा डाउन टू अर्थ थी, लोगों से अच्छा प्रभाव था, वो बहुत, उसका नेचर अच्छा था, लोगों का यकीन नहीं कि सुसाइड कर सकती है।
नहीं, पर अगर
तो
सुसाइड नहीं था, आप अलेज कर रहे हैं कि मर्डर है, पर पुलिस के अनुसार वहाँ बॉडी पे और कोई मार्क्स नहीं थे। देयर वर नो मार्क्स ऑफ इंजरी।
सुसाइड के उत्साह हो, मैं ये नहीं कह रहा कि मर्डर है, सुसाइड के उत्साह हो। एक किसी बेहतरीन कलाकार जिसका फ्यूचर ब्राइट हो, वो कुछ घंटे पहले इंस्टाग्राम पे मोटिवेशनल पोस्ट डालती है और उस दिन वो काम करती है और अचानक जाके वो फंदे लगाती है। मैं ये बात रख रहा हूँ, ये हम उससे सुसाइड भी डिक्लेयर नहीं कर सकते। इसलिए मैंने महाराष्ट्र गवर्नमेंट से बात की, SIT की डिटेल जानकारी होनी चाहिए।
Alright, there must be an SIT. Let me put that across. You made your point. One second. Suresh, one second. I've got your point. I'm now also joined by Vineet Raina, a film actor who's been a co-actor with Tanisha. Thank you very much for speaking to us. Do you believe that this was a case of abetment to suicide? Do you believe that she was in a vulnerable state and that she was driven over the edge? Or do you believe that this is something much worse?
What I know of Tunisha is I saw her always very happy on the sets. She has been very professional, very energetic all the time, very bubbly kind of a girl. She used to be on the sets even when her scene was not there, and she used to sit on the monitor, and we used to crack jokes together. She never looked very depressed. She never looked disturbed with anything. So I can't really comment on it, what was going on in her personal life.
When is the last time that you were in touch with her, or you met her, or communicated with her, sent her a message?
Mr. Vishnu, we were shooting together on a show, and I was shooting till 10th of December. I was there on the set, and we were having our scenes, and we did some really good, spectacular scenes together. And she used to put her 100%, and I could never see her disturbed and not being in the scene. She was there. She was in all those scenes, looking perfectly all right. I couldn't see even
sure, but I mean, in the case
of
somebody who is either depressed or disturbed or whatever it is, you may not necessarily see what they're actually going through. But that said, let me ask you about the relationship itself. Is this something that she spoke about? Were there signs of problems or anything of that sort?
It was quite evident, Mr. Vishnu, that they were very cordial with it. They looked very cordial when they were on the sets. They looked very happy with each other. They used to spend most of the time together on the sets, because obviously they were opposite each other, and most of the scenes they had together. And they looked very happy and very comfortable in each other's company. Nothing of that sort they shared about their personal lives openly. Whatever happened, it happened behind the closed door, maybe when they were in their makeup room. Nothing came out ever.
So apparently they broke up just 15 days prior to her ending her life, or allegedly ending her life. Would you suggest therefore that he was actually present on set even even after this 15-day period? In other words, they may have broken up, but he was still there on the set?
They both were the lead pair of the show. They had to be there, whether being in a relationship or out of it or breakup or anything. They had to be on the set because they were the lead pair of the show.
Sorry,
they had to
I
be
missed
there
that point.
on the sets.
Yes, of course. They were together, acting together. But again, there was no sign or anything, which suggested anything was wrong. Is
nothing ever. I never saw them arguing about anything or yelling.
Do you have anything in your mind, that you feel may have caused this to go wrong? Do you feel that this is a murder case that we are looking at? Do you believe it's abetment? Because the point that was mentioned is that there were 600 to 700 people who were there in the sets in that area, and therefore, how could something like this have happened?
Absolutely. There are always so many people on the set. There were 500, 600 people on the set at that time, and something like that. This is a very big thing that you're telling, that if it's a murder or a abetment to suicide, this is a very personal thing. It must have happened between them. It was never out of their makeup rooms, their personal lives. It was their personal life. It never came out.
Nirmal Kaur is a former Director General of Police and joins us now. Ma'am, how should we be looking at this from an investigation standpoint, and based on the preliminary information which you would also know of, how does one look at this?
See, my information is based on what is being shown on the media, and lots of things do not add up. She's so cheerful and animated just an hour before that. And they break up and then they still keep lunching together. I mean, that is even in the fresh days of breaking up. Even if you become friends, it takes some time before you settle down to the fact that you've broken up. So it doesn't add up. Lots of things do not add up here. And also her going into her room, I mean, she was just 1 hour before, she's so productive and functional. It's if she had a sudden wave of depression or, this, whatever it is that drove her to this alleged suicide, what is it that needs to be thoroughly investigated? I think police has a lot of hard work to do, investigating it from all angles. And all the gaps have to be filled up before any proper conclusion can be arrived at. Because there's a lot here that doesn't really, there must be a lot there that doesn't meet the eye. So what we have is just maybe tip of the iceberg. So they'll need to find out much more about it.
Ma'am, if you were the investigating officer in this case, would you be looking at it as a potential case of murder? Or would you be relying on just what they found, her body with no other evident marks of violence?
See, asphyxiation, the post-mortem report as per the media says that it's death by asphyxiation.
Yes.
Asphyxiation can be, even if I take a garrote and garrote you, the PM report will say it's death by asphyxiation, even when someone garrotes you. So that is the thing. Asphyxiation doesn't necessarily mean that you hung yourself on the some frame.
So it doesn't establish the circumstances, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it doesn't. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's a suicide also. So it needs to be further, it needs to further be looked into, because we saw lots of murders taking place where it's made to look like a suicide. 2, 3, 4 people will come into a room, an heiress or somebody, they hoist her up and chunni leke baandh dete hain, and then they just tie her up on the fan. And later when the parents come back and everybody comes back, it's always a case of suicide. But there are murders which happen that way. I do not know what has happened in this case. One will need to look at much, much more. But she seems much too animated just an hour before to be committing suicide an hour later.
Dr. Anjali Chhabria, as a psychiatrist yourself, isn't it also equally important to remember that a person who's going through anxiety or depression doesn't look in any particular way? They look just like anybody else.
Absolutely.
And so, maybe this depression is a factor that needs to be looked at. Maybe that is it. Apparently, she had attempted to end her life earlier as well.
So, in every history of any person who has died in such strange circumstances, we cannot come to a conclusion, because first of all, we need to remember that yes, she was a brilliant actor. She was she was acting with him. And if she was such a professional person that she could keep her professional and personal life aside, maybe she was going through something and she was not showing it. She was trying very hard. But sometimes we see that, people can have a strange burst of emotions which makes them act in a certain manner. Of course, we need to investigate, we need to get the details, and we cannot comment without that. But just because she looked happy, or just because she was successful, or just because they were being cordial with each other, we cannot say that this is not something that she could have resorted to in some circumstances.
Bhuvan Ponappa, there's this other angle where you've got ministers in Maharashtra now saying that this is love jihad. Do you feel that, this is the last thing that one needs to look at in a murder investigation, that the bogey of love jihad, because it happens to be an interfaith relationship which has gone wrong in some way?
Vishnu, first of all, I think it's very unfortunate what's happened. I pray for her soul. But, until and unless it's investigated and we have, we have a clear picture about, what's happened, I think it's very wrong to, put it across as a love jihad or give it any other angle. But, it's really unfortunate that, we as actors are physically so strong. We eat good food, we go for all sort of classes, but we are so fragile mentally. And I think this is the topic that, we all should be talking about today. How fragile have we become mentally? And, even when, one of these, the Sushant's case happened recently, there were so many cases of suicides which came up after that, saying, for very menial reasons, like, he didn't talk to me today, or, just because, somebody ditched him or her, stuff like that. So I think more than looking at it as a love jihad or creating a political angle to it, I think we should look at how mentally not stable we are, number one. Number two, in India, especially in India, I've traveled to quite a few countries. I've lived in quite a few countries. Most of the countries take mental health very seriously. There are places where you can, if you have a simple mental issue like a hatred or jealousy or simple depression, you could go to a clinic or you could go to a psychiatrist and get yourself cured. But in India, it's still a taboo. If you say, I'm feeling jealous, if I'm feeling depressed, they call you they call you a mentally sick person, and you're looked at like a retard. So I think that should change, and I think people, youngsters especially, should come ahead and tell their parents, tell their friends, tell their surroundings that I'm feeling sick. I feel like killing myself. I feel like whatever going on in my head. I think that's the most important. This is all very important what you're saying. Do today.
Dr. Chabria,
I think that is very important. Yeah.
Go ahead, ma'am. Go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I think that is very important. We are not taking mental health seriously. Just as someone can get a fever and get COVID, similarly, mental health is extremely important. And we have seen suicides increase in our country. In fact, the rate has doubled in the last 10 years. And we are not doing anything about it. We just talk about these things when an incident like this happens. And then we forget about it. So collectively,
this is an important discussion on mental health and why are so many stars or the people associated with the film industry, why have they had these horrible experiences? But Abha Singh, I just want to go back to the criminal aspects or the limited criminal things that we know about. One of the points which was mentioned and mentioned to the police by Sheezan was that there is a certain atmosphere in the country which made him too worried, which is why he wanted to get out of this relationship. Doesn't that seem strange? That yes, of course, Shraddha Walkar in that case was horrible. But if you're in a relationship with somebody, doesn't that seem to be a rather bizarre reason to state to get out of a relationship?
No, Vishnu, it's not bizarre. I'm coming across a couple of young people who are saying that we are in an interfaith relationship, but we are very silent about it. We are scared. We don't want to go ahead with it. So I'm not surprised. But my bigger issue is when Supreme Court in Arnesh Kumar has made it very clear that you should not arrest immediately. If Sheezan was cooperating, if he has no track record, he has no previous history of criminal record, then why was he arrested? Why is so much pressure of politicians, love jihad or media that you arrest a person even though you've not found him guilty? So that is my bigger issue.
What about the allegation of the mother? It is on the basis of what the mother said or alleged, right? That there was something wrong with this relationship. He drove her to suicide. He was in a relationship with somebody else. All of these things were said or alleged by the mother. So therefore, on the basis of that, weren't the police correct?
No,
or
why?
Or they should...
See, that way, even in Shraddha's case, she was facing domestic violence, but her father had broken all relations with her. What was he doing? In this case also, this is a young 20-year-old girl. Why was her mother not aware of her mental health? Why was she not guiding her? Why was the girl not confiding? And if it's a relationship, let me tell you, today girls as young as 16, they are in relationships. So the parents have a bigger responsibility that kids who should be in school, who should be making careers, if they are in relationships, and it's a double burden. Your professional career, your personal problems. So parents have a bigger role to perform, and mother, by saying that no, Sheezan is responsible, she cannot say that she failed her duty as a mother. I have all sympathies for her. But if you're putting an innocent behind bars, then I also have an issue.
Okay. Vineet, is there anything else that you can share with us, on Tunisha, the person, she's gone. And you've told us about her personality. Is there anything else that comes to mind about your friend?
I totally agree with Mr. Punappa, whatever he said, that we should look into each and every aspect related to this thing. Why it happened, what are the other aspects to it, before concluding it and reaching to conclusions on our own opinions. We should, I totally believe in our law and police. I think they are investigating. They should investigate each and every aspect related to it. What I know of Tunisha, that she was a very strong girl. She was very vibrant, very energetic, and I also know that she was an emotional person. She was really very emotional person.
You know, there's a myth here that strong people cannot get depression. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Depression is
You know?
Absolutely real, and the people tend to not show it. Like Mr. Punappa said, that consulting a psychiatrist is still a social taboo.
No, when we say
and
that strong people cannot get depressed, you know, she was very strong.
Yes, they do.
So what happens
they
is
can.
we have seen a very famous actress. You know, she has come out with her stories on depression. So I think anybody, just as anyone can get COVID, anybody can get any mental health issues. And I think that is the point that we need to talk about.
That's what I'm saying, ma'am, that we should, that our law, police should interrogate and do all the possible and check into all the possible aspects
But we should
related
not
to it.
politicize it. We should not politicize these things.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
No, but then Aniket, in fact, that was my question to you. That again, doesn't this sort of feed this beast called love jihad? I mean, statistically, it's unproven as being part of a nationwide conspiracy, right? And yet it is flouted time and time again to push a particular agenda. What we should be discussing is what we've been trying to do over here, the murder. Was it a murder? Was it not? Was it abetment? Was it not? Issues of depression, the circumstances. The moment you put a spin of love jihad on it, then, I mean, haven't we lost the plot?
I completely agree with you, Vishnu. And of late, what we are seeing is that whenever there are inter-caste relationships seen, the bogey of love jihad is being raised. And according to me, unless there is specific evidence or circumstances in support of that, nobody should make claims of love jihad, because it only spoils the case further. That's number one. Number two, let me quote what the Supreme Court has said in several matters, that every person's suicidal pattern is different. In a given situation, one may commit suicide, the other person may not. And at the same time, a young boy and a girl, how they should behave in a relationship after they have broken up, there's no mathematical formula about it. Therefore, merely because they have broken up and they have been meeting over lunches and dinners is no reason to suspect, unless there are other surrounding circumstances which would create suspicion in the minds of investigating agencies. That's number two. Number three, in this case, somebody was saying that it could be a case of murder. Well, the police as of now has registered the case of 306, which is abetment to suicide. Unless the post-mortem report reveals that there have been signs of struggle, resistance or injury marks, bruises, in order to conclude that there has been something more than the case of suicide, of course they would invoke the provisions of 302. But as of now, the investigation seems to be in the direction of abetment to suicide, and the law of abetment to suicide is well settled. They need to show positive incitement at the behest of the accused, and unless that is seen, one cannot really be ultimately convicted. They may charge him with this offense, they may also detain him, they may also arrest him. And with due respect to what Abha ma'am said, since the sentence is up to 10 years, the police have the prerogative to arrest without issuing a notice under 41A. However, having said that, it is an uphill task for the police to collect enough evidence to show that he actually abetted the offense. He actually created circumstances where she was led with no other option but to commit suicide. And unless that is shown, the charge of 306 will not sustain in the courts of law.
In Shashi Tharoor's case also 306 abetment was put, but he was not arrested. So it is just the discretion of the police. So let us not say that if it is abetment,
it's the prerogative of the police.
Yes, so let us not say that it is compulsory that 306 you arrest.
They are not under any duty
putting such a strong charge. But the issue is putting such a strong charge of 306, which entails 10-year imprisonment, should not be done in a hurry. Only after due investigation it should be done. It involves somebody's right to liberty and right to life and dignity.
what happens these days, we all are aware, because of the media pressure, because of the person who has died, the police swings into action,
media pressure,
takes an extreme step, lodges the FIR, and we have seen cases where
Shobha ma'am, one second, let Aniket make his point. Shobha ma'am, I'll come to you after that. Let Aniket make his point, and then I'll come back to you.
We also have to think from the victim side. The victim has lodged a complaint saying that the person who is charged with the offence is the one who has driven her to suicide. Now the law is well settled. If a cognizable information is brought to the notice of police, they have to arrest. They have to register an FIR.
They have to arrest.
Now after registering the FIR, the offence is 306.
Okay, one second.
In order to issue a notice.
Abha Singh, go ahead and respond to that. Yes.
Vishnu, very clear. In Shashi Tharoor's case also, Sunanda Pushkar there, they had put 306, but Delhi police, in spite of everything, did not arrest him. What I'm trying to say is that just because there is media trial, just because some politician comes and says it's love jihad, under pressure, police is not supposed to act. They are supposed to uphold the law of the land only after they are satisfied, they have sufficient evidence which points to his direct instigation. Only then they are supposed to arrest. They are not supposed to misuse their powers which are given to them, that under media pressure or political pressure they arrest. That is my problem, because here it was on the sets. They had broken up whatever relationship.
Sure.
Hundreds of people go on have relationships, but that doesn't mean it becomes abetment.
Aniket, go ahead. Yep.
Vishnu, nobody is saying that police is acting under pressure. We must give them a benefit of doubt. We should not make statements where they are not being represented by their spokesperson. The offence is 306. It entitles them to arrest without issuing a notice is all that I'm saying. They are within their legal jurisdiction, within their legal competence to make that arrest. However, having made that arrest, they must further show that the charge that they have invoked is sustainable in the eyes of law. For that, they have to collect evidence, and if the evidence is not found, they can always file a report under 169, which means that the police will say that no enough evidence is found, and therefore we are releasing this man.
So by that time, the person's life, what happens to that innocent man who further goes and commits suicide because he's been maligned by the media, he's been maligned in the society. There have been cases like that. So my issue is that just because there is a media trial, you are not supposed to arrest anyone. So many innocent lives are lost because they have been arrested.
Madam, the law
that
is so well settled.
No,
whenever
then if the law is well settled,
invoked,
Mr.
that
Aniket,
person has the liberty to move for 3 years bail. He can go for anticipatory bail to secure his
liberty. Okay, both of you one second.
Because
you tell me, Sunanda Pushkar had injuries on her body, but was Shashi Tharoor arrested?
No, but that cannot be a precedent. That is for the police to take a call. In which case they have to arrest.
In this case, let's go on the facts.
All right, one second. Let's ask Nirmal Kaur, ma'am. Okay, both of you, 1 second. Both of you, 1 second. We can't hear either of you. 1 second, ma'am. Were the police hasty in charging him with abetment to suicide?
I wouldn't say that. The mother has very explicitly named him for her state of mind or whatever drove her to this action, and she is an FIR accused. It's very easy to be an activist and talk of liberty and all, but it's very difficult to be a policeman. She should try wear that coat for 7 days, and she'll realize he's an FIR accused, and I don't think police has acted in a hurry at all. It is a very proper course of action, the only course of action before the police. All they have to do is now, tie it up. Find enough evidence and circumstantial and otherwise anecdotal and all that, and tie it up. If he really is, he has abetted her suicide, and once you know he's an FIR accused, arrest is the only logical thing for the police to do. There's nothing else. I don't know what Sunanda Pushkar ma'am is quoting.
If they do not find enough evidence, they will file a 169 report.
We cannot forget Jihad Khan's suicide.
Why should we look at them with suspicion?
My issue is, please don't act in haste.
If police do their job, we have a problem.
We know how the police
don't do their job.
Okay, all right. Okay, all of you. I'm running out of time. I suspect we're going to be looking at this very, very closely. But at the end of the day, let's spare a thought for the young woman who has passed away. It is absolutely tragic. And hopefully there'll be justice because that's what this is all about. I need to take a short break. We're going to turn our focus after that to bank frauds in the country. Venugopal Dhoot of the Videocon Group, a giant of Indian industry, has been arrested, as has Chanda Kochar, the ex-boss of ICICI Bank. Why is India's banking sector so vulnerable to frauds like this? It's coming. Well, up next on the program, the Central Bureau of Investigation has arrested the Videocon group founder Venugopal Dhoot in connection with the ICICI bank loan fraud case. The arrest comes 2 days after the arrest of the bank's former CEO Chanda Kochar. The CBI is investigating a case linked to alleged irregularities in an over 3,000 crore loan provided by ICICI to the Videocon group when Chanda Kochar was heading the private sector bank. The big question, bank frauds in India, why do these happen so frequently and where does this leave the system? We've got a great panel, but first I'd like to go across to Jaimani Bhagwati, the director of IDFC Bank, and Rajneesh Kumar, the former chairperson of SBI. Mr. Bhagwati, let me come across to you first. We can look at this through various prisms. There's the entire issue of bank fraud. Then we can look into the entire issue of insolvency, in certain cases, the issue of recoveries as well. But ultimately, when it comes to Chanda Kochar, isn't it an issue of trust that a leader of a bank as large as ICICI could betray the trust of millions across the country? How does one, how would one look at this in any way apart from that this is a woman who breached the trust of millions across the country with what appears to be an out-and-out case of corruption? I give you a loan, my husband takes back a small amount.
No, you're absolutely right. There is a breach of trust here. But there's a context to all this in the sense of what has been going on in the banking sector in our country. And correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that loan has been fully repaid. But I may be wrong because, there are so many items which are flashing across one's phone today because of this arrest of this high-profile person. But take a step back. To look at long-term lending within India. You might recall the economic survey of 2016-17, and we keep talking about the twin balance sheet problem. The one side is the bank, and unfortunately, public sector banks are always held up to ridicule, and I strongly disagree with that point of view. And the private sector banks, and in this case, this is a private bank, which started off as a term lending institution in 1955 and did a reverse merger. Individuals can go wrong at various places. I would think that one needs to look at it systemically. And systemically, for one thing, we don't want to open up. Now, for instance, we are talking about, this is a relatively small loan that Mr. Dhoot has taken. If I remember right, there was Videocon Industries took 65,000 crores from Bank of Maharashtra, defaulted on it, and has only repaid 5,000 crores. So this goes on and on. So I'll stop here unless you want me to give more details about the background.
Rajneesh Kumar, Mr. Kumar, how should one actually be looking at this? Because Chanda Kochar is somebody who actually cleared this loan, a part of which evidently landed into her husband's account as some sort of a kickback or a payback. But along with her, there were other extremely well-known people who were all leaders in the banking sector who were part of the process to clear this. So was this not an out-and-out failure of leadership to clear this loan in the first place?
No, Vishnu, let me clarify or let me make a statement that a case which is under investigation and sub judice, to me it is not appropriate that we discuss this. Right? When I agreed to come on the channel, it was about the banking frauds in general. So, a specific case, I will not comment. Because we can't do this at a national TV channel where the CBI is investigating the matter and courts are looking into the matter.
Why don't you tell us what this is about, sir? Isn't this part of a larger problem? Because it's not just Nirav Modi and it's not just the others. It's the list is huge and the amount in terms of recoveries is minuscule.
So let me put the matter in perspective from the banking point of view about the frauds. So banking system is prone to the fraud. So let us admit that is the reality. And the frauds are of several types. One are what is called credit related or loan related frauds. The other is about the operational frauds. When you go to ATM, your card gets copied, money is siphoned.
Yes.
In many cases, there is identity theft. You do a transaction on an e-commerce site, there is a case of identity theft. and a fraud would happen. The other category is phishing calls which you receive. So the frauds relating to credit also can be of several types. One is in couple of states, I won't name the states, but when I was SBI chairman, there were mortgage related frauds where because their land records were not properly maintained and the title deed would turn out to be defective or fraudulent. So that is another category. Till 2012 or 13, when RBI came out with a circular where they said that if there is a diversion of funds, that has to be reported as fraud. Prior to that, diversion of funds was not reported as a fraud. It was NPA. Now, frauds can happen for both reasons. One is where there is an insider involvement, and the other is where there is no insider involvement.
Right.
So what you have to recognize and realize that banking system, because it deals in money day in, day out, and millions of transactions happen, it is vulnerable to frauds, and it is not that the banking system does not react to it. For every case, there is a root cause analysis done. You take steps to plug in what were the weaknesses which led to the fraud. And then sometimes the fraudsters would find
and yet, Mr.
ways.
Kumar, if you look at just the amount recovered and the number of cases which exist, I realize our banking sector is huge, but the volume of cash which has disappeared, it just shows that this is a system at so many levels which is failing.
No, again, as I said, that when it comes to loan-related frauds, what you have to recognize that we are double counting also in it. That one is that there are NPLs and banks are making provisions, and for a couple of years, 4 or 5 years, there was a situation when the NPL problem was the accounts which became NPL, it was very high, and all the banks suffered in the process. And as I said, that till 2012, till such time IBR said that diversion of funds is a fraud, it was not accounted for as a fraud. So that is, let us not get into numbers. But if you are asking me,
no, but sir, why not get into numbers? Because in fact, Mr. Bhagwati has come out with these numbers with a great deal of detail. And would you like to come in? I mean, I was just looking at the entire process of recovery. But half a second, sir. These statistics are important. I don't think in our country it's enough to say that, look, it's a system which reacts and it's a big system and there is a system of checks and balances, we try and fix it. One of the biggest problems is the amount of time it actually takes to sort out the mess. In fact, there was this number, 270 days as of March 2021, ongoing insolvency resolution processes, about 80% were not resolved after 270 days, which is the statutory outer limit. That's just one of any number of examples. Bottom line, there's no justice. It's justice delayed.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want me to comment on that.
Please, comment. That's why I'm asking you.
Yeah, you have a strange situation where the then leadership of RBI came out with a circular in February 2018, I believe it was. And then it was struck down in April 2019 by the Supreme Court. I think one can criticize a judgment of the Supreme Court, not the judges. So I very strongly criticize that judgment on the grounds that that particular circular of RBI, which internal RBI studies showed, managed to hasten the process of resolution of cases, which again became slow after that particular guideline was struck down by the Supreme Court. But coming back to what you said about resolution and the number of days it is taking, let me put it very pithily. You have 70 judges approximately in our national company law tribunals. You need 5 times the number, which is 350, and that responsibility falls squarely in the ambit of the central government.
Right.
It has not appointed enough judges. You look around the world. I've actually done a study. That's why I'm familiar with the numbers. And nowhere in the world can you manage this kind of loan volume and the number of cases with the number of relatively junior NCLT judges. So you need to beef up the process by which the insolvency.
Yeah, otherwise this will keep getting heard forever. Okay, I'm also joined. Sure, I'm also joined by Nasir Salim. Madan Sabnaviz also joins us. Also, HP Ranina. I'd like to thank you three for being with us. Nasir Salim. The other the other point which I think one needs to sort of look at is the actual volume of these rupees. It's staggering. If you look at the average amount in terms of loans which have been given, which are it's upwards of 20,000 crores as an average in many of these high-profile cases. So, what does that actually indicate about the banking sector?
Good evening, Vishnu. See, I'll tell you, volume aside, I think that's a pertinent question, but I think that's also a function of the rate which the economy is growing.
In fact, let me give it to you in a little bit more detail. I found the point that I was looking for. The latest, one of the newer economic surveys have reported that the average size of non-performing loans for the 50 largest borrowers was estimated to be about 20,000 crores. This is a colossal amount.
No doubt. I think, the volumes are large. And I think, coming back to your original question on to the earlier two panelists, I think, Vishnu, we have to somewhere go back and understand two key things here. Number one, is there any quid pro quo situations that arise when we look at this from a framework of policy? See, I'll tell you something, Vishnu. RBI has set out very stringent guidelines and policies for disbursal of loans, and especially large ticket sizes which have consortium financing.
Yep.
They're consortium, financing options basically. And there, if you ask me, the SOPs, the bank's code of conduct, the framework for dealing with conflict of interest and fiduciary duties are very clearly outlined, I must say.
Okay.
They need to be followed to the T, Vishnu. And I think, wherever we've seen an imbalance between corporate governance and, corporate governance is something which is essentially involves creating a balance between the many stakeholders of the company, such as shareholders, customers, suppliers, executive, government, and the community. Whenever there is an imbalance between any of this, we see frauds amounting to this colossal amount that you've mentioned.
Sure. Just one sec. I wanted to quickly go across. I'm running short on time. Madan Sabnaviz with us. The other point is the entire issue of recoveries. If you look at the amount recovered as a percentage of the amount involved, 2012, 2013, only 22%, went down to 18% the following year, 12%, 10% 2015, 2016, 10% 2016, 2017. The actual recoveries are a joke. The money is gone. It's disappeared.
Absolutely, Vishnu. I think that's the malaise which we have whenever we talk of this kind of willful defaults. And while the number which you're talking of is definitely large, we should also remember that it's just these few handful of cases which give overall banking a bad name. So the way I look at it, Vishnu, is that this needs to be a wake-up call for the overall banking system. Because, the problem is that when the conditions are very good in the economy, everybody tends to be over-optimistic. The lending standards are also narrowed. Now, what you're talking of in terms of fraud, I think that would be more a kind of an exception than a rule. But I think banks tend to be a bit more lax when things are going good. You think, okay, credit is going to grow at 20%, 25%. And you also feel that these kind of big ticket loans which you give also helps you to meet your own targets in terms of your own profits or whatever the income which you're targeting.
Right.
And that's what I think that's a kind of an error which was made, which led to the NPA problem. And part of it, what you're talking of, has also resulted in these fraudulent cases. So I think this is something which banks are cognizant of, rather than looking at, okay, what's happened is definitely not good. But I think if banks have learned the lesson and have better processes for screening the loans and more importantly, monitoring the end use. I think what you're talking of is really whether the funds are being used for the purpose for which they've been taken. And I think that is definitely work in progress. And I think the banks are quite cognizant of this fact. And I think they have taken a lot of action on this.
Mr. Ranina, this is the point that keeps coming up. If you look at the sanction strength of judges in an economy as large as ours, where frauds come up, and that is at one level on account of the size of the beast. The effort to actually raise the number of judges is minimum, it seems. Isn't that at the root of the problem, that there is no justice because there aren't enough judges?
You're right. This is a perennial problem in India because there is this tussle between the government and the judiciary as to the appointment of the judges. If that can be speeded up somehow, if some more powers can be given by which, say, the Supreme Court can appoint at least the lower category judges as fast as they can, then things can be speeded up. Another issue is that we have this retirement age of 62 years and for High Court judges and 65 years for Supreme Court judges. There's no need for this age limit. We can easily extend this limit and make sure that the existing judges who have a wealth of experience can continue to function. Even as ad hoc judges, there's a provision in our constitution where the ad hoc judges can be appointed. Now, why can't this be done so that the number of judges increase? Why do judges have to retire at the age of 62? When the Supreme Court judge continues till 65, in America, they're there for life. But apart from that, we can easily have a group of people who can certainly sit on the benches and expedite these matters. Now, in NCLT today, what we found that they are dealing with corporate law matters, they are dealing with IBC matters, they are dealing with so many matters. We need to have a separate.
And there are only 16 benches.
For IBC and for NCLT.
As I understand it, there are only about 16 benches in all of India.
You have additional benches only for insolvency, additional benches for company law. You have to have more judges, more specialized judges.
Right. So it's not enough to say that the system has to be cleaned up. If the system isn't cleaned up, who's there to clean it up if the judges aren't in place? Look, I'm out of time on this, but I'll end by the way I began. The entire case of ICICI, a colossal breach of trust, in some of people who we believed were some of the finest in the country. Let's see what finally happens in the court. But why is India's banking sector so vulnerable to frauds? Unfortunately, I suspect that's something that we'll need to revisit. I'm out of time on this program. From all of us here, good night.